I'm really conscious of the fact that there are only a handful of special first times in life. The first kiss, the first date, right? The first time at school, the first time in the job.
The first time you experience Ferrari strategy, though in fairness, that's a different kind of special. When Lewis Hamilton announced that he'd escaped Toto Wolff's sex dungeon for Italy's most famous glue factory, the reaction was rather unlike anything we've ever seen before. And by the midpoint of the 2024 season, things were looking up for the Briton, securing his first race win in 3 years at his home Grand Prix no less, and looking to have potentially refound some of that form that took him to so much success in the 2010s. I really hate how we talk about that like it was so long ago. My quarter-life crisis aside, I said things were looking up. Turns out they were looking up a bit like Mark Webber is here, as the latter half of the season can only be personified as the aging antelope about to have its face ripped off by a pack of lions. Hamilton's qualifying pace in particular dropped off a cliff, leading to him grovelling to the media by the end of the year, saying that he was just, quote, not fast enough anymore, a sympathy appeal that got him to the regions of nowhere. Ferrari weren't concerned by this, however, and like a desperate boyfriend, took the I can change her approach. Only this usually ends in disappointment and an empty bank account. Coming into 2025, there was still cause for optimism though. The characteristics of Ferrari's car were said to be better suited to Hamilton's driving style, both in the nature of the front end and the fact that it doesn't attempt to shatter your spinal cord the moment you put your foot down. Lewis was also skipping around Maranello like a kid in a candy store, clearly excited about his change in scenery and ready to get started. Now to think that was only a matter of months ago. Fast forward to present day, and we're back to that familiar picture of woe is me, which is a bit of a theme for British drivers at the moment. Despite a win in the sprint race at China, if Hamilton's start to life in red was a fairy tale, it would probably be one of those original endings, like when Sleeping Beauty was just a story about necrophilia. No, I'm not kidding, look it up. She somehow still has kids, who are then nearly chopped up and served to her husband. There are even some, admittedly in the minority for now, already questioning whether Lewis should keep hold of that seat. Well, one thing's for sure, I'm not leaving mine, thanks to FlexiSpot, who have agreed to sponsor this video. You may well remember these guys for delivering my new desk about a year ago, and I've thoroughly been impressed with it ever since. So when they slid back into my DMs and asked if I wanted to check out their new Lotus sofa, I wasn't going to say no. To compare it to the F1 team of the same name, the comfort this chair provides is like the peak Senna era, and thankfully nothing like when they signed this dude in their death throes. For a man with the practical ability of a brain squirrel, assembly was surprisingly simple. The sofa comes with a rocking mechanism, a secret compartment for I don't want to know what you put in there, and a super smooth recliner, complete with a leg rest to put your feet up and laugh at whatever Ferrari strategists opt to do next. There's also a motorised version on sale if you're really feeling extra lazy. It's really perfect for all kinds of people, whether you just need to relax, whether you're a mother with children, even if you're an expectant mother. As someone who's been referred to as a pregnant woman myself, I find it very comfy. I was also impressed with FlexiSpot's customer service, who were really quick and helpful when it came to answering any queries I had with the product. So, if you're looking at this and thinking, yes, I too want to live the life of the people in the Wall-E movie, well, I have good news for you, as it's FlexiSpot's brand month with lots of deals and discounts over their entire website. For example, the Lotus recliner's over £100 off, complete with a 3-year warranty and a 60-day return if it's not to your liking. Go check it out using the link in the description and pinned comment below. And now let's get back to Lewis Hamilton. So let's start from the top. Round 1, Melbourne, and we should probably give Hamilton some leeway here. His first race in a new car, with a new engine, and totally new surroundings, all up against a guy who seems to have this superpower of turning Italian men's cocks red raw. So to NQ3, just 2 tenths down Leclerc, all while testing out EA's new reverse track feature earlier in the day, is a pretty decent performance at the end of things. Lining up 8th then, Hamilton's debut weekend with the Scuderia would be made all the more difficult thanks to God dumping the Atlantic Ocean on the Albert Park layout. However, while many, including teammate Leclerc, experienced their wide array of specialisms, Hamilton quietly went about his business, even leading the way at one stage. And if you're a member of Team LH, now might be a good time to press M on your keyboard. In reality, it was a pretty dreadful afternoon for the Briton, in part due to his race pace, or lack of, and in part due to Ferrari wanting the story of Hamilton leading his debut Grand Prix so much, they opted to let him try the dry tyres on a wet track challenge. By the time the dust had settled, Lewis was in the points, but barely. Leclerc 2 spots ahead in a weekend that would be solely remembered for #bless despite of the K1 button. Maybe then things would get better in China. And actually they would. Pole position for the sprint, which soon transferred to victory the day after. Lewis Hamilton was a winner for Ferrari, and yet no one seemed to care. Maybe it was the fact that this was only a sprint, maybe it was the fact that half of Europe was still in the middle of their early morning wanking session, but the levels of hype around this were way lower than one would expect given the high-profile nature of the move, and perhaps that was for the best, as Saturday qualifying would roll around and Ferrari were back to being again. First and fourth became fifth and sixth. Hamilton still the lead Ferrari as the Scuderia scurried around in the dark looking for answers, which as it turned out came in the form of taking a sledgehammer to Leclerc's front wing and setting both cars up to be illegal in different ways. Even before Sunday's embarrassing double disqualification that raised the suicide rates all across Italy, things were not looking good for Lewis Hamilton. He turned his teammate's front wing into a Marshall souvenir at turn 1 before being outclassed over the distance despite that, and despite China being one of Hamilton's better circuits on the calendar, provided we ignore what happened in 07. In the space of just a few hours, the race-winning pace that saw Hamilton dominate the sprint was gone, and while we'll get back to this later, first we need to move on to Japan. This is where things really start to make you want to find the nearest piece of Ferrari merch and strangle yourself to death with it. Hamilton's deficit to Leclerc expanded to 0.3 in qualifying, the largest it had been all season, and whilst the Monegasque started Sunday's race on the second row, Hamilton was stuck down in 8th, and out-qualified by a V-carb no less. Given the historic characteristics of the Suzuka circuit, aka given Suzuka is just a little bit shit, that meant P7 was the best Hamilton could muster by the time the checkered flag fell. The only silver lining, Hamilton revealing that he'd identified a fundamental problem on his side of the garage, and upgrades for the next round in Bahrain would bring the Briton back into form. Well, remember those radical new upgrades? They did in fact have a sizable impact as we approached round 4, as long as by sizable you're referring to the gap between the two drivers and the copium now on display from the Ferrari fan base. The supposed difference maker that was meant to take Hamilton right back into the fight instead left him 0.6 away from his teammate, and also behind the guy he replaced for this year, driving a Williams, which was designed by a spreadsheet not too long ago. This left Hamilton compromised on race day, tootling around in the depths of nowhere until Carlos Sainz modified his Williams with a f***ing glory hole and brought out the safety car. That came at the perfect time for #blessed, who got to spend the rest of this one with a front row seat to the Bottle World Championship in front, but despite the gaps all being neutralised, Leclerc was once again able to extract more from the car and entered the race with a significant margin in front. By this point in the season, the magic of the Ferrari move was gone, and Lewis was back to being the miserable little f***er that's become more and more of a presence in the paddock since the race that cannot be named. Sorry, a Hamilton fan must have overheard that. One sec. There, that's better. One thing was pretty clear then. Hamilton just didn't have any confidence in that car. Not the best place to be when Jeddah's next on the schedule. Sure enough, the gap was large once again. 4th and 7th for Leclerc and Hamilton respectively, and while Charles was able to take his first podium of the year, Hamilton would go nowhere. He spent the majority of this one looking up Kimi Antonelli's anus, and even when Ferrari stuck #blessed on fresh tyres, he still couldn't get by. Fortunately for Lewis, he got a week off to reset, and next up was a sprint weekend, which seems to be the only thing he can do right at the moment. Sprint qualifying would still go the way of Charles Leclerc, however, though the gap was back down to the 0.2 we saw at the beginning of the season, and the fact that we're taking that as a positive shows us just how far we've fallen, doesn't it? Leclerc must have been feeling bad for Lewis at this point, as on the way to the sprint grid, he opted to sit this one out by bitch-slapping the Miami walls. That opened the door up for Hamilton, who kept his composure when the lights went out, and benefited from the Red Bull terrorist attack to snatch up an unlikely third at the end of Saturday morning. Giving Verstappen's crew all the credit isn't totally fair here though. Hamilton drove very well himself, and Ferrari boxing Lewis at just the right time put him in the position he needed. Unfortunately, Ferrari still used the free version of their strategy software and had used up all their credits before the big points were decided on Sunday. I feel I've been pretty negative in this video, so let's take the glass half full approach with this one. In the times when Leclerc has outqualified Lewis this season, Miami Grand Prix qualifying saw the smallest delta to date, Hamilton just 0.06 of a second off his teammates. Unfortunately, this was also the difference in only one of them making it out of Q2. If this wasn't painful enough for Ferrari fans, they were then forced to stay up and watch as the team released the Avengers Endgame of strategy f***ups. Hamilton found himself on the faster tyres and on the back of Leclerc, though by the time the team had pulled their finger out of their arse and agreed to let him by, said tyres resembled David Attenborough's scrotum and Leclerc was left in the better position, leading to a rather awkward exchange on the pit wall as they played straws to decide who had to ask Lewis to give the place back again. The pair would come home with disappointing 7th and 8th as a result, and it just makes you wonder what a Ferrari actually achieved this season, besides being the first team in F1 history to have both cars disqualified from a race for different reasons, built a car that gets faster when you crash it while getting slower when you try to improve it, all the while making strategy calls that managed to piss off both drivers. You know, you could almost call that an achievement. But after a quarter of a season, what's the verdict? Well, you always have a go at me for my in-depth analyses, so here, have a f***ing graph for once. This one showing the qualifying delta between Hamilton and Leclerc over the year, this one showing their overall finishing positions, and this one showing the amount of visits I've made to your mum's house in the last month. Long story short, if you're also a Lewis Hamilton fan, it's really not a very nice picture for you. Leclerc leads Hamilton 6-2 in both the qualifying and head-to-head battles. For the record, I'm including their original finishes in the Chinese Grand Prix for these statistics, because let's be honest, Leclerc being a microgram lighter and Hamilton having a slightly thinner plank mean all in the grand scheme of things. A lot of this deficit can be put down to Leclerc having more confidence in the car, and that makes sense when you consider he's been ingrained within the Ferrari team since 2019, while Lewis is still trying to remember everyone's names. But that implies that once Hamilton does bed himself in, things will start to improve, a bit like Carlos Sainz a couple of years ago. But you see, I don't think it's that simple. I want to talk about Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, what else do you expect from me at this point? He's currently making these slightly suspect-looking adverts for portable speakers, having been replaced at VCAR by the supposed next Max Verstappen over here. Yeah, that sure aged well, didn't it? Anyway, I bring this up because of an interview we had back at the 2024 Canadian Grand Prix. The Honey Badger having just qualified a mega P5 around Montreal, and commenting that as he'd gotten older, the first thing he'd begun to lose was his consistency. The second thing, as it turned out, was his Formula 1 seat. Now bear with me as I go and drown myself. I do wonder if we're seeing this with Lewis Hamilton now, and in fact have been for a fair few years at this point. His last season with Mercedes had its high points, but equally there were some pretty big and sustained lows over there as well. Now we're at Ferrari, and while Lewis has proven he has the pace to outqualify Leclerc, he's only managed that twice in 8 attempts. It's a concerning pattern of behaviour, and there's no guarantee that Britain will ever be able to get out of it. The one saving grace? Well, that's Ferrari being dog shit in 2025. The car only appears to have any ounce of competitive pace when it's on a lighter fuel load. In the main Grand Prix, unless half of Leclerc's wing is hanging off, they're not challenging for squat. That at least sets the focus clearly on 2026 and the new regulations, and perhaps the last attempt for Hamilton to salvage anything from the bookend of his F1 career. Those new regulations will be a lot less reliant on ground effects and should technically suit Hamilton's driving style better, but that's no guarantee. And with the benefit of hindsight, as attractive as a Hamilton-Ferrari switch was in February 2024, considering what Carlos Sainz has achieved in the last 18 months, maybe it would have been a better call for just all the drivers in this video to have remained where they were. Those are my thoughts at least. Let me know yours down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. A big thank you to FlexiSpot once again for sponsoring this video. And cheers as well to all the members and patrons who got this one a few days early. I'll be working on some exclusive content for them later this week, so if that sounds interesting to you, or you just want to help support the channel, head down to the link in the description below. I'll be back later with another video. Until then, have a good one.